The cover page of One Piece Chapter 1136, titled The Country That Awaits the Sun, features Yamato, Hold'em, and the others facing a secret base in Udon, one that clearly possesses the iconography of the former Tobarapo, Who's Who. We haven't seen the talkative Saber-Tooth since he was suddenly the first person to talk about the sun god Nika, but that just ended up offending Jinbe and granted the big cat a big beat down. And I guess it's time for another one, courtesy of Yamato. Also, Tama really one-shot Hold'em. How that's funny and all, but the implications are kinda crazy. I mean, the guy was a Shinichi of the Beast Pirate. That's the same rank Hawkins, a supernova with a bounty of 320 million berries, was given. Obviously, the failed smile user isn't on the same level, but he had to at least be decent for Hawkins' rank not to be a straight-up insult. So I'd like to imagine he'd be a pretty credible threat if he were somewhere like the East Blue. Yet an 8-year-old Tama was able to put him down. Between nearly joining the son of the Pirate King's crew and being a major element of Emperor Luffy's triumph over the strongest creature, Kaido, Tama already sounds like a pirate legend before hitting the double digits. The chapter begins with Luffy chowing down on some of the massive moose meat that Harridan and Stanson brought for him. He mentions that it's kind of like dinosaur meat, which makes sense since that thing was definitely part reptile or something. Ja Rule said that they're hard to catch due to their ferocity, but also known to be quite delicious. Even so, such a task was the least the two could do in honor of Harridan's savior. Luffy shouted his appreciation while chucking a bone and moving on to another helping. Hopefully Dory and Brogy weren't betting on those leftovers, and with the way Luffy eats. Poor Elder Ja Rule has no idea what he signed up for by holding up this plate. Giant or not, the geezer might not be able to feel his arm by the end of this. We also have a very Mika-esque pose, expression, hairstyle, and weapon from Little Big Cologne over here. Ja Rule admitted that it's pretty rare for humans to make it up to the Sun Realm, that usually they tend to confuse the underworld with Elbaf proper and run away before they make it up. That could very well be a contributing factor to the inhospitable reputation of the place. They should really put up some more signs if they want to change that. In the middle of the fun, Lysop told the gathered giants that the legendary warrior Oars was 3 times bigger than any of them, along with the fact that he put the big guy down. And I use the word fact very loosely. Late-stage Usopp is seriously a menace because by virtue of being on a Yonko's crew, most are inclined to believe every word he says. Elsewhere, Jinbei was just minding his business when a group of giants came over to talk about his blue skin color. He let them know that where he's from, there are as many different skin tones as there are fish in the sea. That prompted another one to mention how much he's always wanted to see a mermaid, which resulted in another guy straight-up fetishizing Jinbei's people. They're genuinely curious and not mean-spirited at all. But this is a very accurate depiction of what it can be like to be a minority in a foreign land. But speaking of fetishizing the prince himself, Sanji was absolutely fiending over the giant women. And man, it must be hard to be a Sanji fan when he's given facial expressions like this one. Maybe that old wanted poster wasn't so inaccurate after all. Then a group turned to Brook, wondering what's up with him. Brook decided to answer that with a song, and I wonder how long the anime might stretch that out to be. It might just be a banger. In good spirits, they use this as an excuse to make a toast to the vastness of the world. Zoro surprised that so many giants have never actually gone out to sea. Nami felt the same way. She sort of assumed that they were all pirates, which is pretty close-minded, sweetheart. In the next moment, she was shocked to see the busted face of Road, who'd come to apologize for his previous behavior. Although he won't be easily forgiven, Gerd gave him enough of a beating to get them an apology. And Road happens to be the kind of perv that enjoys her sadistic ways. Zoro told him not to worry about it since no one died. But as he drained his mug, he added that that last part is only since Usopp stopped him. Otherwise, he would have taken the giant's head from his shoulders. The color drained from Road's face even faster than Zoro's drink. He fell over in fear. The others couldn't believe the fool picked a fight with them without checking their current bounties. He was obviously way out of his league. Gerd made a chopping gesture and sweetly told Zoro not to hold back next time, which got a shout from Road. Although, the threat made him swoon inside. That said, he argued that everyone born on Elbaf shares the same dream as him, to become the new sun god and rule the world. Zoro took notice of the godly mention. But the conversation immediately caused an uproar. Instead of being a ruler, some argued that the sun god was all about liberation, while another camp viewed him as a being of destruction. Yet another held the opinion that he was the god of laughter. Luffy noticed the commotion and wondered what's up with all the god talk. Ja Rule then spoke of something called the sacred Harley text, tales passed down in Elba for generations. But because they were written in an ancient language, there have been plenty of different interpretations. I wonder if Robin might be able to decipher them. Because no one knows which translation is truly accurate, such debates persist. And according to the texts, the world has already been destroyed twice before. And each time, the name of the sun god Nika is mentioned after each instance. Now, if the world has faced cataclysm twice, then that probably accounts for Joy Boy and Nika before him. Most likely, all of these interpretations are accurate. Joy Boy was a ruler. Nika was a liberator. Destruction followed them both. And the form naturally begets laughter from the user. Muffy actually dwelled on the name Nika before reaching for some more food, which resulted in us receiving the most glorious depiction of Nika yet. There's a whole lot to be said about this. But although it's unclear if Nika was the savior of the world, or the great destroyer that caused its fall, either way, he is a figure that heralds great change. Which is why the powers that be, during any given time period, feared the sun god's rise and return. Okay, now we see here that Nika has a sword and a shield. The sword isn't anything new, but the shield sure is. In his previously less defined silhouette, we see that he wields a sword and a spear. This shield also bears the crest that predates the appropriated symbol of the world government. We've seen it several times now, notably in Kuma's church, where he revered the deity. But before then, there was also Rebecca's shield, which bore the same visuals. She also wielded a sword, not to mention having about as much exposed skin, but we'll skip over that bit. Several of the lands the Straw Hats have visited bear some sort of symbolism, iconography, or culture connected to or derived from Nika or Joy Boy reverence, to the point where it feels like Luffy is simply fated to tread the same waters and walk in the footsteps of his predecessors. Funny enough, at one point, Luffy also had a sword and shield on Dressrosa. On Sky P, there was a depiction of a sword and shield-wielding warrior with flowing hair. And he was facing off against a multi-headed snake. This immediately elicits thoughts of the sun god facing the world government. After all, there are 6 heads, yet only one of which is meaningful enough to be displayed. As in, the king of the world Emu, and the 5 elders that surround them. Emu's means of attack also boasts rather serpentine movements, but this could just as easily be an alluding mirror to Luffy's liberation of Wano. Gear 5, and by extension Nika, are very Jesus-coded. That's practically undeniable thanks to Kuma's Bible, crosses, and church. And in regards to the Bible, there's a passage that undoubtedly inspired the core of the Wano arc. I won't read it all out to you, but there's the mention of the devil being a titanic dragon, aka Kaido. The dragon had multiple heads, aka Orochi. The dragon gave power and authority to a ferocious beast that bore the features of several different animals, aka Orochi and the Beast Pirates. The dragon and beast were both worshipped by the people, like how Kaido and Orochi were revered by the people of Wano. The beast ruled for many years and spouted proud and blasphemous things, Orochi's occupation of the country and mockery of its culture and history. These nefarious forces went against the people of God, as in anyone on Luffy's side. But those who turned to the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world would find salvation. The fleece of a lamb is typically known to be white, like Luffy's Gear 5, and the lamb is Jesus. Once again, Nika. And being slain from the creation of the world seems to be what happened to Joy Boy, who is someone Kaido sought but was too sinful to recognize even when he was looking right at his second coming. There's also the mention of captivity, which Luffy dealt with, and the mention of the sword, which Wano is famed for and Nika wielded. Honestly, seeing all these connections reminded me of when we realized that My Hero Academia is pretty much just Greek mythology. And Oda, are you trying to tell me that the OG warrior of liberation was black? Don't bait me, man. If he's not, I hope it takes another 100 chapters for his face reveal, because I'd like to enjoy this. But between that and him being a sword wielder, I get the feeling that Zoro is probably more interested than I am. Anyways, that's enough of the tangent. Back to the chapter. Luffy recognized the name Nika since Bonnie mentioned him before. Ja Rule accredited the Sun God to being someone that the hopeless and desperate can turn to for salvation. He's said to be covered in white clouds, has white hair and white clothes. There's also his contagious and booming laughter. That knowledge clued Luffy into why everyone keeps saying he looks like the guy. But the goofball is sure that it has nothing to do with him. The elder's eyes were wide then. Ironically, he's having this conversation with the wrong person. The drunken warrior pirates told Luffy not to be so dismissive of the Sun God. Everyone born on Elbaf looks up to him. They weren't trying to defend Road or anything, but they do all share the same dream in one way or another. Ja Rule chimed in to say that Loki was the same, and believed that Loki killed his own father to follow in Nika's footsteps. But the giants of Elbaf refused to accept any justification for what the prince did. Luffy thought about that while munching. He asked if it means that Loki is actually a good guy. But every giant, even an old granny, uproariously agreed that he most definitely is not. Apparently, there was a prophecy before Loki's birth that said King Harold would be killed by his own son. And at that point, can you really be surprised that it ended up happening? Imagine being charged with murder when you're still in the womb. And shortly after Loki was born, the royal steed, the horse of fortune, died. So to make matters worse, they blame you for the death of the country's mascot before you can even sit up on your own. That was also the year that Lin Lin killed Elder Joe Rule. So damn, Loki's pretty old then. With that in mind, Big Mom trying to pair him up with her daughter is kind of crazy. A year later, the queen died, and I hope they're not blaming a 1-year-old for that one too. By the age of 10, Loki's absurd strength allowed him to turn the underworld into his own personal playground. He is said to have killed many beasts and tamed the rest, even releasing some into the villages. Loki was even an arsonist whose mischief endangered many lives. And here, Loki holds his head just like Luffy did in Gear 5, but who's to say that gesture wasn't out of grief? After all, crying can sometimes sound like laughter. Since he had the authority of a prince and a malicious personality to boot, he caused a world of trouble any time the king's back was turned. So he was a mischievous child in a land where his people branded him as a villain from the very beginning and idolized a symbol of freedom that was able to destroy what he didn't like and enjoy a good laugh. Not exactly what I'd call a villain, but apparently he killed their beloved king in his castle. The same castle that's a relay point for evil teleportation. King Harold was beloved as a wise man who sought to expand the country's horizons and get the world to see them as more than just a land of warriors. Like with Dressrosa and Wano, it seems like we have another royal figure whose name has been run through the mud on account of falsehoods and misunderstandings. A giant even pointed out that Lord Gerald was stabbed while trying to stop Loki. The big guy was grateful to have been saved by his helmet in the end. Which Luffy wasn't so sure about, and this is genuinely one of the funniest One Piece gags in a while. Loki's reign of terror ended 6 years ago when Shanks came to capture him. Luffy perked up at that. He actually did a bit of a dance on his plate. They let him know that Shanks was on the island a little while ago, although they're not sure where he's gone since then. Zoro contemplated what he heard while taking another swing. Later, on the outskirts of the village, Zoro spoke to Luffy in private since he could tell his captain was strangely on edge earlier. Luffy told him about his deal with Loki, and Zoro assumed that the Kingslayer is just lying. Luffy was pretty upset at that since Loki said that he knows where Shanks was. He yelled about how badly he wants to see him again. Zoro knows that well enough, but is pretty sure that Loki only said that to trick him. But Luffy questioned how Zoro can be so sure when he's never even met the guy. Zoro admitted that he's just saying all this based on Loki's reputation. The prince promised to tell Luffy everything he knows, including where Shanks is right now. If Loki was really lying, Luffy plans to give him a major beat down. Loki's been chained up for years now, so any information he has on Shanks's location must be thanks to his mysterious contact. Someone affiliated with Shanks likely left him to transponder Snail for some reason or another. Also, Luffy is a lot more intent on seeing Shanks than I would have expected. Of course, they promised to reunite one day, but we know he sends Shanks during his movie promo at the end of Wano. I'm sure he could have slingshot himself in that direction, if his desire is that great. But maybe I'm just overlooking something. Nami decided to join the two on their way to get the key they need to free Loki. After all, they'd hardly be able to find their way there alone. Zoro trying to navigate somewhere as big as Elbaf would probably double the chapter count. Zoro agreed to do this, but under the condition that they put Loki down if he tries to pull anything. Luffy happily agreed, but he had to wonder why Road was with them. Nami introduced him as her new slave, which I can't help but feel is a bit insensitive considering so many of their friends have a tragic history with slavery. But all right. Either way, Road doesn't seem to mind. Furthermore, Zeus made sure to establish the pecking order as Nami's number 1 slave, Sanji being her number 2 slave, and now Road is number 3. Road really likes strong women. Nami actually made him submit by striking him with more lightning. He tried to bond with her over their shared role as navigators. In response, she told him to never try to get close to her again, which he cheerfully agreed to. Nami kinda feels bad about leaving the party early despite being the guests of honor. Luffy told her not to worry about it since he brought some moose meat along, clearly missing her point. Road assured her that the others are all so drunk that they probably can't even remember what they're supposed to be celebrating. Nami asked him if all the castle's treasure going missing would be a problem. Road made it clear that he turned a blind eye. Zoro realized that this was on her mind from the start. He could see it in her eyes. But hey, they're pirates. Death should be a given. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Loki was laughing with realization. He refused the offer he'd just been given. Although he's sure it's quite the honor to be invited to become one of the Holy Knights, that must mean that they're celestial dragons, and he has no interest in willingly becoming that sort of scum. The Shanks look-alike had half of his unscarred face hidden beneath his cowl. At this point, there's not much of a secret anymore. He's definitely not Shanks. I think that Loki would have a different reaction if you realize was the guy who bound him in the first place. He asked his partner if they have any intel. She responded that all the informants they sent to Elbaf reported the descent of a giant crow before losing contact. She was appalled by their weakness. So Loki Road has been unintentionally saving Elbaf, and many of those former Block Country residents are actually government dogs. The girl with mismatched eyes was sick of standing by and listening to Loki's impertinence. We then see her full design as one of her sleeves unraveled and became a pointed arrow. Her name is Gunko. Her attire looks similar to that of an old-school Gakuren or Japanese school uniform. She also wears a military cap with goggles that is quite similar to those worn by the Revolutionary Army, so perhaps there's a history there. But all that aside, where the hell are her pants? Not only does it throw the whole fit off, but it's also a freezing cold tundra here. Yet here she is, showing panties. Gunko is a walking Brook joke waiting to happen, but maybe she's like Senor Pink and Frankie can fight her. Being a woman in One Piece tends to come with an empty closet, but this is a bit extreme. Whatever the case, she's intent on punishing Loki, but her partner urged her not to be too hasty. Just then, a giant wolf angrily approached them. Loki told the wolf to eat them up. It loomed over Gunko. She told it to stay away if it wants to stay alive. Yet she made a move before it could even react to her warning, and with a twirl of her fingers, the arrow circled the beast's neck. Loki tried to call out, but it was already too late. Gunko hung the loyal creature, and this ability of hers is very reminiscent of emus. Loki cried out. Not Shanks asked the giant if he changed his mind in exchange for the wolf's life. Now Loki had a better measure of their character. That said, he was willing to accept his friend's fate and wish him peace in death. Grief and rage have their place, but a warrior never kicks and screams when faced by death. He'll swallow all of his fury and use it as fuel when he destroys the world. Quite the respectable declaration and dedication from the ever-disrespected prince. It's funny how even the strongest celestial dragons are so stereotypically villainous in their selection of victims. Himu slaughtered a guy in a wheelchair. Saturn took out an old man. And here Gunko is choking out a dog. They need to get some real fights on their record already. It's been way too long since we've had a One Piece chapter to enjoy, so I hope you're as grateful as I am. Don't miss out on the latest manga action. Enjoy this chapter and stay tuned, The next exciting episode will be dropping next week. See you then for more twists, turns, and epic adventures. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel Level Up Ani for all the latest updates and exclusive content. Thank you for your support. We couldn't do this without you.